Hi, my name is Jupider Berrysmith, and my project is called Workshops for Writers, Re-envisioning the Undergraduate Creative Writing Workshop through the lenses of inclusion and exploration. And my mentor is Dr. Lena Owaydot. So a little bit about me. I am a senior creative writing major, and I'm going to be getting my MFA in the fall. And I've been doing research about creative writing pedagogy for about the past 2 years. So my question is, how can undergraduate creative writing pedagogy be developed to better serve student writers? So first, a little bit of background on the writing workshop. So a writing workshop is basically when students are in a classroom, they bring in their own work, whether it be fiction, poetry, nonfiction, to be critiqued. And then everyone talks about it, and there's lots of different ways that that works. But the main workshop model that is commonly used began at the University of Iowa and then quickly spread to other programs. This model involves many things, typically the gag rule, which means that students are not allowed to speak while their piece is being workshopped. And there's also lots of emphasis on getting written feedback and preparing for publication. And this model has historically led to a lot of competition and alienation within the classroom and has been majorly critiqued in recent years. So my methods for my research involve primary research by surveying undergraduate students and interviewing faculty members. And then I also conducted secondary research, which consisted of me reading scholarly works and reports of alternative workshop models. And a lot of my research comes from the Anti-Racist Writing Workshop by Felicia Rose Chavez. So I won't go totally into my survey results and my interviews results because there's a lot there, but I'll just give you a brief overview. So based on my undergraduate student survey results, I found that not most, sorry, I found that a lot of students had issues with the gag rule, and a lot of students did not feel wholly served by the workshop. And then for my faculty interview results, I found out that many of their teaching methods were based on the Iowa model, and a lot of them learned to teach by example through TAing. And many have experimented with different workshop methods over the course of their careers and mainly experimented with giving students more agency within the classroom. So, my recommendations based on my findings, I've split these up into two categories. The first one being preparing for workshop, and then the second one is during workshop. So, for preparing for workshop, I think it's really important for students to discuss their writing goals and fears in a neutral environment. And I think it's also really important that this process is modeled by the instructor, because at the undergraduate level, a lot of these people are very new writers. They haven't maybe encountered creative writing ever before, or they're just at the beginning of their writing journey. So it's really important for them to talk about their own writing goals and really understand who they want to become as a writer. And this also, them talking about their fears, helps create like a more intimate space in the classroom so everyone feels more open to sharing and giving feedback. I also think it's really important for the professor to explain the history of the workshop methods and the learning objectives of the particular workshop method they're using that semester. And this just gives students a lot of context about why the Iowa model can be damaging and why the professor is choosing to alter it in certain ways, and really help them understand what the purpose of the workshop is. And then going into that, I think it's also very important to establish that the goal of the workshop is for students to experiment with their writing and not simply to evaluate their work. So really just to have them understand like it is okay to write anything you want to write. You can experiment with lots of different things. The goal at the end of a workshop shouldn't be like, oh, you have a piece that's ready to publish. It's just like a place of exploration, and discovering your own voice and style. So during workshop, here are some things I think would be really helpful. I think it would be super great if students were encouraged to bring in incomplete drafts of work to workshop. This is very different than pretty much any of the workshops I've ever been in, where you're supposed to bring in like a final piece, and a lot of students feel the pressure to bring in their best work and kind of like win workshop, win the professor's approval. Um, but this does create a lot of competition, and it also just doesn't lend itself to the classroom being a space of learning. So I think if students were bringing in incomplete drafts, they would be able to experiment more and just feel more free with the different types of stuff that they're writing. I think it's also really important to have transparent writer-directed conversations where students have the opportunity to discuss their work in a low-stakes, conversational, and intimate setting. So I came up with this because I think I've had the best feedback from my writing when I've just been talking with my other friends who are writers. And so in the classroom, this can translate to just being able to have a dialogue back and forth where the writer isn't silenced. And it gives them just a lot more agency, and they can actually say what they're trying to do with the piece and ask specific questions. and give context if their peers are unsure of what's going on in the piece. And that way, no one really goes off course or is giving feedback that isn't actually helpful. And this goes into the point that discussion is valued more than written feedback. So having discussion be highly valued as opposed to like annotating work before workshop gives the writer a lot more agency and is also meant to like simulate that casual conversation. And it also prohibits their peers from being able to just like tear apart a piece of work on the page. And also just really promotes that like human connection, which really helps with that like intimate setting in the classroom and letting students just feel really like safe and heard. I also think it would be really great for writers to bring in their own questions that they have about their work so they're able to direct the conversation um, and tell their peers like what their intentions for their work are. And then finally, I think it would be really great if the professor acted more as a facilitator rather than the final authority. So obviously, they would still be able to give feedback along with the students, but their word would not be the be all end all of the conversation. Thank you.